Beneath the softest starlight, where ancient wood breathes secrets, hidden journeys softly unfold. Over the next 2 hours, let yourself drift into the stories of warm room overlooking a silent snow lake, a forgotten compass in a deep wooden chest, and a forgotten wooden door in the quiet workshop. 3 quiet stories gently woven together. Welcome to Night Feather Sleep Stories. The thick glass window was cold to the touch. Inside the house, the air was warm and smelled of firewood burned hours before. Outside, the winter night held everything in its grip. Elias kept his hand pressed flat against the window pane, feeling the ice try to cross the transparent barrier. His eyes tried to find the path that led to the water's edge, but there was no path at all. The snow fell continuously and heavily, covering the yard, the dirt slope, and the old wooden deck that rested upon the lake. Maybe this is just another one of those quiet stories, made to help you relax. And sometimes that's all we really need. Perhaps this is just another one of those tranquil stories, made for relaxation, and sometimes that's all we need. Everything had transformed into an immense, unbroken blank sheet. The outline of the deck where he used to sit to observe the water had disappeared under a shapeless mound of accumulated snow. The lake itself was frozen and invisible, merging with the shores into a boundless landscape. The absence of that space, swallowed by the silent storm, brought a sense of isolation. The resting place was lost beneath the winter's embrace. Elias pulled his hand from the glass, leaving a warm mark that soon began to fog and fade away. He decided he wouldn't wait for the day to brighten to reclaim that space. Dawn was approaching, and he wanted to be out there on the clean, firm deck when the first light of morning touched the white vastness of the lake. He would clear the path, rescue the wood from beneath the ice, and prepare a place to greet the day. The silence of the house was profound, broken only by the sound of his own steps on the plank floor. He walked to the hallway where he kept his winter clothes. The preparation needed to be careful. The air outside would not forgive haste or carelessness. He put on a long-sleeved thermal shirt, feeling the snug fabric embrace his skin. Over it, he pulled on a thick wool sweater, fuzzy and heavy. The scent of clean wool rose to his nose, an aroma that recalled winter itself. Next, he took his lined trousers and put them on. He sat on a wooden bench near the door to pull on his socks. They were long socks, knitted with thick yarn. He pulled the fabric up to his calves, ensuring there were no folds that might bother him later. The dark leather boots came next. Elias slipped his feet inside them and pulled the laces tight, crossing the threads and tying the loops firmly. The weight of the boots on his feet brought a sense of firmness, a solid base to face the slippery ground. He stood up and took the long coat from the hanger. It was a robust piece with a soft lining that protected against the wind. He put on the coat, zipped it to his neck, and adjusted the collar. He placed a dark wool beanie on his head, pulling the edges down to cover his ears. Finally, he slipped his hands into soft leather gloves, flexing his fingers a few times to get used to the slight restriction of movement. He was ready. Beside the door, leaning against the wall, was the snow shovel. Its wooden handle was long and polished from use, and the wide metal blade had slightly worn edges. Elias held the shovel with one hand. With the other, he picked up a kerosene lantern that rested on a small table. He turned the side knob, lifted the glass, and struck a match. The small yellow flame was born trembling and soon stabilized when he lowered the protective glass. The warm light illuminated the space around the door, casting long shadows on the floor.
He turned the cold metal doorknob and pulled the heavy door open. The cold night air immediately invaded the house, bringing with it the clean, damp scent of fresh snow. There was no wind, just the constant, silent fall of thousands of white flakes. Elias took his first step outside, feeling his boots sink into the thick layer that covered the porch. He closed the door behind him. The lantern's light revealed the vastness of the work that awaited him. The night was dark, the air was icy, and the snow continued to fall. But he had a clear goal. He walked to the edge of the porch, raised the shovel, and prepared to clear the first stretch of his path. The porch ended in 3 steps that led to the yard. Elias couldn't see the steps, only a gentle slope of untouched snow. He positioned the lantern on the stone ledge beside him, where its light could illuminate the beginning of his path. The yellow flame created a circle of clarity that made the snowflakes sparkle like silver dust before they touched the ground. He held the shovel with both hands. His right hand stayed near the metal blade to guide it, and his left hand gripped the end of the handle for leverage. He lowered his body slightly and pushed the tool against the base of the snow. The metal cut through the white layer with a dull, soft sound. The snow yielded easily, for it was fresh and light, not yet compacted by time. Elias lifted the loaded shovel and twisted his torso, throwing the white mound to the right side. The sound of snow falling on snow formed a continuous whisper. He repeated the motion: push, lift, discard. With 3 strokes, the first wooden step appeared. Its surface was damp and dark, contrasting sharply with the surrounding whiteness. He cleared the other 2 steps with short, precise movements of the shovel, ensuring the soles of his boots found firm wood before descending into the yard. Stepping onto the level ground, the snow reached almost to his knees. The path to the lake was about 20 long strides, descending a very gentle slope. Elias began to dig a straight trench. He pushed the shovel forward, gathering a large amount of snow on the wide blade, then lifted it, throwing the weight to the sides. The physical effort began to generate warmth under his layers of clothing. Elias's breathing became deeper and more measured. Each time he exhaled, a cloud of white vapor left his mouth and mingled with the cold night air, disappearing moments later. The rhythm of the work established a cadence in the silence of the pre-dawn hours. The scrape of metal on the frozen dirt ground, the sound of effort, the soft thud of snow being piled on the path's edges. He advanced step by step. With each meter gained, the snow walls on the sides of the trench grew a little higher, forming a narrow, clean corridor. The lantern's light, which he had moved to the edge of the path, cast his moving shadow against the white walls. The snow continued to fall from the dark sky. Flakes landed on the shoulders of Elias's coat and the fabric of his beanie, but he didn't stop to shake them off. The warmth of his body prevented the accumulated snow from truly freezing there. He felt the shovel's weight shift with each movement. Sometimes the snow was looser, flying easily when thrown. Other times, he encountered small, denser pockets near the ground, requiring a little more strength in his arms and back. The texture of the shovel's wooden handle was familiar through the leather of his gloves. Elias maintained a firm posture, bending his knees instead of curving his spine, preserving his energy. The scent of the air was sharp and pure. There was no scent of earth nor of plants, only the metallic, clean aroma of extreme cold. The world around him seemed to have been placed on pause, muffled by the thick layer covering the distant trees and the roof of the house behind him.
He reached the halfway point of the path. He paused for a moment, resting his chin on his crossed hands atop the shovel's handle, and took a deep breath. The icy air filled his lungs, bringing a sense of alertness and vividness. He looked back, seeing the straight, dark line he had drawn in the white mantle. The contrast between the scraped earth and the edges of untouched snow was gratifying. It was proof of his progress. Elias picked up the lantern and walked back to the front of the trench, positioning the light further ahead. He resumed holding the shovel. The sound of work began again. The descent towards the lake became a little more pronounced, and he needed to firmly plant his feet with each step to avoid slipping on the exposed, damp earth. The shapeless mound that hid the wooden deck began to take on clearer contours as he advanced. The path was being restored, once again connecting the house to the edge of the sleeping water. The corridor opened in the snow ended exactly where the firm ground met the deck's structure. Elias plunged the shovel into the accumulated snow beside the path, leaving it standing, and picked up the lantern. He raised the light to assess what lay ahead. The rectangular deck, which stretched for a few meters over the frozen lake surface, was now just a gentle, unbroken rise of whiteness. There was no separation between where the wood ended and where the thick ice of the water began. The metal shovel would not be the right tool for this stage. Its hard blade could scratch the old planks or get caught in the gaps between them. Elias needed something gentler. He walked back along the corridor he had just opened. His steps were now silent on the beaten, clean earth. He went to the side of the house, under the eaves of the roof where the snow couldn't reach, and picked up a broom with thick, stiff bristles made of hard straw tied with wire. Upon returning to the lake's edge, the silence seemed even denser. The snow continued to fall, slow and vertical. Elias placed the lantern on the first wooden pillar of the deck, which he had partially cleaned with his hand. The light radiated over the white surface that needed to be swept. He held the broom and took his first step onto the invisible deck. He felt the firm wood beneath his boot sole, hidden by a thick layer of soft ice. He positioned the broom and pushed the bristles against the snow, sweeping from the center to the edges. The sound changed completely. It was no longer the dull cut of the shovel, but a harsh, rhythmic scrape of the hard bristles against the wet, cold wood. With each sweep of the broom, a strip of dark wood appeared. The deck's planks were old, marked by the sun of many summers and the rains of many winters. The dampness of the melting snow made the wood appear almost black under the lantern's light. Elias swept with long, continuous movements. He pushed the snow off the deck's edges, letting it fall onto the frozen lake surface with a soft, crumbling sound. The work required patience. The snow in the corners and around the small mooring posts was more stubborn. He had to use the tip of the broom to poke and loosen the white blocks that clung to the base of the wooden pillars. The scent of wet wood began to rise, mingling with the cold air. It was a deep scent, remembering of damp forests and soaked tree bark. Elias advanced slowly along the structure. He cleared the central area, revealing the straight lines of the planks laid side by side. The gaps between the wood were filled with solid ice, forming thin white lines that outlined the deck's floor. The visual contrast was strong and beautiful. The yellow light of the lantern revealed the grains and knots of the wet wood, returning texture to what was once just a white void.
Elias's breath continued to mark the rhythm of the work. White vapor left his lips and rose towards the darkness of the sky. He swept the right half of the deck, pushing the snow onto the frozen water, and then moved to the left half. The sound of the broom echoed very subtly over the lake's ice plain, a solitary sound in the vastness of the night. When he reached the end of the deck, the part that extended furthest over the lake, the layer of snow was a little thinner, swept by previous winds that were now calm. He cleared the last planks with lighter movements. The broom scraped the final wooden edge and pushed the last line of snow into the white abyss below. Elias stepped back 2 paces and lowered the broom. He looked at the completed work. The deck was entirely exposed, a dark, clean, defined rectangle floating upon the infinite whiteness of the frozen lake. The structure had been rescued. The space was once again available, offering a safe and firm place between the earth and the ice. The wooden floor, dark with dampness, lightly reflected the lantern's glow, seeming to breathe again after being freed from its icy weight. With the deck completely free of snow, Elias began to walk slowly over the dark wood. He wanted to feel the stability of the structure beneath his feet. The thick soles of his boots made a hollow, firm sound with each step. The wood was icy and slippery in some spots, requiring him to tread carefully, distributing his body weight evenly. As he approached the left corner of the deck's end, he took a step and felt the surface give slightly. A sharp creak broke the muffled silence of the night. Elias stopped. He moved his right foot, pressing on the specific plank. It sunk about a centimeter and emitted a dry friction sound. The edge of the wood had come loose from the support beam just below. The original nail must have rusted and given way with the expansion of the ice over the previous weeks. That small unevenness was a simple problem, but one that needed fixing. Elias didn't want an unstable floor when he came to sit there later. He left the broom leaning against the deck's side railing and picked up the lantern. The path back to the house was quick, along the corridor he himself had dug in the snow. He passed through the front door and walked along the outer side until he reached a small tool shed attached to the back wall. The shed door creaked open. The smell inside was of cold dust, grease, and aged metal. Elias raised the lantern to illuminate the rustic wooden shelves. He found a small metal box stained with dry paint. As he opened it, the sound of nails clinking together rang clear and metallic. Elias chose 3 long, thick nails with rough bodies, ideal for securing heavy wood. He put the nails in his coat pocket, feeling the cold metal through the glove fabric. On the same shelf, he picked up a short-handled, heavy-headed hammer. Elias closed the shed and made his way back. The snow continued to fall,
and some flakes were already lightly dusting the bottom of the trench he had opened, but not enough to hinder him. He arrived back at the deck, walked to the end, and placed the lantern near the loose plank. The yellow light shone directly on the gap where the wood lifted. He knelt on the damp floor. The cold of the wood quickly penetrated the thick fabric of his pants, but he ignored the discomfort. Elias removed the glove from his right hand and put it in his pocket. He needed tactile precision. He plunged his bare hand into the other pocket and pulled out one of the nails. The metal felt incredibly cold against his warm fingers.
With his left hand still gloved, he pressed the loose plank down, aligning it perfectly with the others. With his bare right hand, he positioned the sharp tip of the nail on the wood, a few centimeters beside the old hole where the previous nail had failed. He then picked up the hammer, a familiar weight in his grip. The first strike was gentle, just a tap to embed the nail's tip in the wood grain and hold it upright. The sound was a muffled thud. He moved the fingers that held the nail away and adjusted his grip on the hammer handle. He raised the tool a little higher and delivered a firm strike. The sound of metal striking metal echoed loudly through the cold air, a sharp, clean crack that traveled across the flat surface of the frozen lake and was lost in the distant darkness. He struck again, and once more. With each blow, the nail sunk into the dark wood, pulling the plank down, forcing it against the support beam. The rhythmic sound of the hammer blows seemed to organize the night's silence, marking time and work. With the last strike, the nail's head sunk slightly into the wood surface, leveling perfectly. Elias repeated the process with a second nail, securing it a little further to the side to ensure the plank wouldn't twist in the future. The hammer blows sounded again, precise and sure, a comforting rhythm in the quiet. When he finished, he put the hammer and the remaining nail in his pocket and pulled his right glove back on. His hand was red from the cold, and the glove's lined interior brought immediate relief. He stood up, wiped the dampness from his knees with his hands, and stepped firmly on the plank he had just repaired. There was no creak. The wood was solid, perfectly integrated with the rest of the deck. The structure was whole, secure, and ready to bear the hours to come. With the deck clean and firm, the space was prepared, but the air remained biting. Staying there for long without a heat source would be impossible. Elias looked at the lake's edge, exactly beside the start of the deck, where the earth met the coarse, frozen sand. It was a safe spot, far enough from the wood to pose no risk, yet close enough for the warmth to reach anyone sitting on the structure. He walked to the chosen spot. The snow there was still untouched. Using his boot, he began to push away the white layer, drawing a circle on the ground. He pushed the snow to the edges, creating a small raised ring that would function as a natural barrier against the creeping wind. The bottom of the circle revealed dark stones and earth hardened by ice. Elias returned along the path to the side of the house, where he kept his winter supplies under a thick tarp. He lifted the edge of the tarp, revealing an organized pile of cut firewood. The wood was dry, protected from dampness for months. He picked up 3 medium-sized logs cut in half, showing the light, fibrous interior of the tree. The scent of dry sap and old wood filled the air near him. He placed the logs under his left arm. With his right hand, he picked up a small wicker basket that contained thin kindling, pine bark shavings, and a handful of dry moss he had collected in the autumn. It was the starter material, essential for getting the fire to catch quickly in the extreme cold, a crucial first step. Before returning,
He needed to make one last stop at the tool shed. From there, he retrieved a cast iron brazier. It was a heavy piece, shaped like a shallow basin, supported by 3 short, thick legs. The iron was so cold it seemed to burn through his leather gloves. He arranged the firewood logs inside the iron basin, held the brazier by the edges with both hands, and the wicker basket hung from his pinky finger. The weight was considerable, and he walked back with slow, calculated steps.
Upon reaching the circle he had cleared in the snow, he lowered his body and placed the iron brazier in the center. Its 3 metal legs settled on the frozen stones, ensuring stability. The dark iron contrasted sharply with the white snow around it. Elias removed the logs from inside the basin and placed them on the ground within reach of his hands. He began to prepare the fire bed. First, he lined the bottom of the iron brazier with the dry moss. The moss looked like a fragile gray sponge. Over it, Elias organized the pine bark shavings, creating a small, loose pyramid. The scent of resin from the bark was strong and sweet, a promise of quick burning. Next, he took the thinner kindling from the basket. He broke them in half with his hands. The sound of the thin wood snapping was dry and crisp, like tiny bones breaking. He positioned the kindling over the moss and bark, crossing them to leave space for air to circulate. A fire needs to breathe to be born. Finally, he took 2 of the smaller logs and placed them on the sides of the small kindling pyramid, forming a shelter that would protect the initial flame and, at the same time, begin to warm the thicker wood. He worked with precise movements. There was no rush. Preparing the fire was a ritual of patience. Every piece of kindling had its place. Every piece of tree bark had a purpose. Elias looked at the arrangement inside the iron basin. The structure was perfect. The cold pre-dawn air passed silently over the brazier without disturbing the pile of dry wood. The scene was set. The metal, the wood, and the oxygen awaited only the initial heat to transform the icy darkness of that shore. Elias reached into the inner pocket of his coat, near his chest, where his body's warmth kept things dry and warm. He pulled out a small wooden matchbox. The box was slightly worn at the edges. He opened the cardboard drawer and took out a single thick matchstick, its red head intact. He knelt down beside the iron brazier. The wind was completely absent, which would make the task easier. He held the box with his left hand and the matchstick with his right. With a quick, firm movement, he struck the match against the side striking surface. The friction produced a short hiss, followed by the crack of the spark. The yellow and bluish flame instantly sprang forth, illuminating Elias's face and the brazier's edges. The smell of burnt sulfur was quick and sharp. He protected the small flame with his cupped left palm and brought it close to the center of the wooden pyramid. He touched the tip of the lit match to the dry moss at the base of the arrangement. The moss didn't hesitate. It absorbed the fire immediately, glowing an intense red and spreading the flame to the pine bark shavings just above. Elias drew his hand back and watched. The pine bark began to crackle. The resin contained within them boiled for a second before transforming into a bright, agile orange flame. The fire climbed, licking at the thin kindling. The sound of the fire being born was a soft crackle, a constant murmur that began to break the vast silence of the frozen lake. A thin column of gray light smoke rose straight towards the dark sky, smelling of pine and warmth.
As the kindling caught fire, warmth began to radiate out from the brazier. Elias felt the temperature change in the air near his face. He waited until the flames were strong enough and carefully pushed the two larger wooden logs closer to the center. The fire embraced the thick wood, darkening its outer bark before beginning to consume it. The crackling sound became more frequent and robust. With the fire established and secure within the iron basin, Elias stood up. The warmth was already beginning to melt the snowflakes that came too close to the brazier, transforming them into water droplets before they even touched the ground. He needed the last element to complete the space. He walked back to the house, passing along the path, now illuminated not just by the lantern on the deck, but by the flickering glow of the fire at his back. He entered the porch and picked up a folding wooden chair that leaned near the door. It was a sturdy chair with a seat and backrest of thick, stretched canvas. Over the backrest, he draped a heavy wool blanket, a plaid pattern in shades of dark green and black. He carried the chair and the blanket back to the lake. Upon reaching the deck, he opened the chair with a simple movement. The canvas stretched with a dry sound. He positioned the chair on the clean planks facing the white immensity of the frozen lake, and at an angle where the warmth of the fire just beside it on the shore could reach his legs and torso. He arranged the wool blanket over the seat, letting part of it fall over the backrest to protect his back from the cold coming from behind. He ran his hand over the thick wool fabric, smoothing out the folds. The texture was rough, but it promised to retain all the necessary warmth, a comforting thought. He walked to the lantern, which still burned on the deck railing, and dimmed the flame by turning the side knob, leaving only a minimal glow. The main light was now from the fire in the brazier. The flames danced over the firewood, casting moving shadows on the deck planks and the surrounding snow. The space was ready. The path was open. The wood was firm. The fire was lit, and the resting place awaited. The night's arduous work had ended. He walked to the canvas chair and sat down slowly. The wood of the seat yielded a little under his weight, settling in. He pulled the ends of the thick wool blanket and wrapped them around his legs and hips. The heavy fabric formed an impenetrable cocoon against the cold air. He sunk his back into the backrest, relaxing the shoulders that, until a few minutes ago, had borne the weight of the shovel and hammer. To his left, the fire in the iron brazier had reached a steady rhythm. The orange and yellow flames enveloped the firewood logs, transforming the dark bark into fine, glowing ashes. The heat radiated in gentle waves, brushing against the fabric of his coat and warming the side of his face. The sound of crackling wood was a comforting sound, a living companion in the midst of the still immensity. The smoke rose straight and dissipated into the upper air, carrying with it the dense, pleasant scent of burnt pine. He looked ahead. The sky above the lake began to change texture. The deep, opaque darkness of pre-dawn was yielding space to a very dark, almost indigo blue. The snow had stopped falling. The air was clean, free of moving flakes, revealing crystal-clear visibility. The frozen lake stretched before him like an infinite, flat plain, completely white and untouched. There were no marks, no tracks, just the vastness of the ice covered by snow, meeting the dark line of trees on the opposite shore, far in the distance. Elias reached his hand into the large pocket of his coat and pulled out a matte metal thermos bottle. He unscrewed the lid, which served as a cup, and pressed the central button. A stream of dark, steaming tea poured into the cup. The vapor rose in dense spirals, carrying the strong aroma of dark herbs and wet earth. He held the cup with his gloved hands, feeling the warmth of the liquid pass through the metal and leather, reaching the tips of his fingers. He brought the cup to his lips and took a small sip. The tea flowed warm down his throat, spreading a wave of warmth from the inside out, meeting the fire's heat that came from the outside in. The contrast between the hot liquid and the biting air he breathed was invigorating. He lowered the cup and rested his hands in his lap, taking a moment to rest. The transition from night to day happened in absolute silence. The light didn't appear all at once. It came as a slow seepage. The dark blue of the sky began to fade, transforming into a pearly gray. As the sky brightened, the white of the lake seemed to gain its own luminosity. The reflection of the soft morning light on the untouched snow created a diffuse glow, eliminating the harsh shadows of the night. The distant trees, once just a dark mass, began to reveal their individual contours, their branches heavy and curved under the weight of the accumulated snow. The silence was so profound that Elias could hear his own breath and the faint hiss of sap boiling in one of the logs in the brazier. There was no wind to sway the branches, no birds awake, no sound of running water beneath the thick ice. The world was immobilized in a state of perfect peace. Elias pulled his hand from the glass, leaving a warm mark that soon began to fog and fade away. He decided he wouldn't wait for the day to brighten to reclaim that space. Dawn was approaching, and he wanted to be out there, on the clean, firm deck when the first light of morning too. Elias leaned his head against the chair's fabric and breathed in the clean morning air. The smell of smoke was now very subtle, almost imperceptible, mingled with the damp freshness of the ice. He observed the outline of the deck where his feet rested. The dark, clean planks, which he had swept with such care, contrasted sharply with the surrounding white. The nail he had hammered kept the wood firm and level. The path he had opened in the snow, the trench with white edges that ascended to the house, a straight line of effort and intention that now seemed to organically belong to the landscape. He took another sip of the tea. The liquid was still almost boiling. The brightness increased another degree. The gray of the sky began to take very pale shades of pink and violet near the horizon, where the still invisible sun began to announce its presence. The soft light touched the lake's surface, and tiny ice crystals on the snow sparkled for an instant, like glass dust scattered over the white plain. Elias remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the horizon, allowing the morning silence to fill the space he had prepared. The sun did not appear as a sphere of fire on the horizon, but as a white, cold brightness that spread from behind the thin layer of high clouds. Morning settled in completely, illuminating every detail of the snow-covered shore. Daylight revealed the true color of things, the very dark green of the distant pines, the grayish-brown of the deck planks, the black iron of the brazier, and the dazzling white of the frozen lake. The fire in the iron basin had diminished. The tall, agile flames were gone. What remained in the center of the brazier was a mound of red, pulsing embers covered by a thin layer of white ashes. The embers emitted a dense, heavy, constant warmth that heated the air near the ground and kept Elias's boots comfortable. Occasionally, an ember crackled with a very low sound, and a small point of red light glowed more intensely before fading. Elias finished the last sip of his tea. The metal cup was now just lukewarm. He screwed it back onto the top of the thermos bottle with a slow movement. The sound of metal rubbing against metal was the only artificial noise in the morning stillness. He placed the bottle on the wooden floor beside the chair leg. He felt no rush to get up. The cold air touched his face, but the rest of his body was perfectly insulated and warm beneath the layers of wool, leather, and canvas. He looked at the path opened in the snow, the trench with white edges that ascended to the house. The work was done. The connection between the warm shelter and the vastness of the lake had been restored. The physical effort of the pre-dawn hours had dissolved, leaving behind only the feeling of a well-tended space.
Elias leaned his head against the chair's fabric and breathed in the clean morning air. The smell of smoke was now very subtle, almost imperceptible, mingled with the damp freshness of the ice. He kept his eyes open, observing the stillness of the white world before him. The embers beside him continued to radiate their silent warmth. He remained there, sitting on the firm deck, perfectly at peace with the silent morning that had just been born.
The small metal desk was opaque, heavy, and cold, forgotten in the darkest corner at the bottom of a leather chest. Its surface, once bright, now showed the color of dry earth covered by a thick layer of dust and time. The object didn't reflect the room's light. It was locked, silent, as if it had given up on pointing any direction. Matthias held the piece in the palm of his hand. Its weight revealed it was solid, made to last, but abandonment had stolen its purpose. With his thumb, he tried to push the small side latch to open the lid, but the metal wouldn't yield. The hinge was stiff, glued by years of humidity and disuse. Maybe this is just another one of those quiet stories, made to relax. And sometimes that's all we really need. Perhaps this is just another one of those tranquil stories, made for relaxing, stories that simply unfold. And sometimes that's all we need, just a quiet moment. Matthias made a simple decision. That old compass wouldn't spend another night at the bottom of the chest. He would clean it, loosen its parts, restore movement to the needle, and shine to the brass. The object would find its north again, its true purpose. He closed the leather chest lid with a muffled thud. The sound quickly faded in the room, swallowed by the dense silence coming from outside. It was a winter night. Beyond the double-paned window, snow fell ceaselessly, covering the dirt ground, the rooftops, and the tree branches with a thick white blanket. The snow muffled the world's sounds, creating a profound stillness that made the house's interior feel even safer and more isolated. The air near the window was cold, but the center of the room was warmed by an iron stove where thick logs burned slowly. Matthias walked to his work table, a firm, light wooden plank illuminated by a yellow-domed lamp. He placed the compass in the center of the table. The sound of metal touching wood was dry. He pulled up a high-backed chair and sat down, feeling the comfort of the seat. The lamp's yellow light fell upon the compass, revealing more clearly the dark oxidation spots and the dirt accumulated in the grooves of its rim, a testament to time's passage, waiting for his touch. He breathed deeply, smelling the faint scent of wood smoke and the distant crispness of winter that always found a way to seep through the cracks. His hands were warm. He rubbed them together for a moment, preparing for the task. The work would require patience. There was no rush. The night outside was long. The snow continued to fall in slow, silent flakes, and time within that room seemed to have paused, waiting only for the movement of his hands. Matthias opened the table drawer. The sound of wood sliding was soft. From it, he took out a piece of clean cotton cloth, a small glass vial containing cleaning oil, and a thin-tipped wooden rod. He arranged these items around the compass, creating a small space of care. The lamp's light cast short shadows of the objects on the table. He looked at the closed compass once more. The work was about to begin, and the first step would be to remove the thick layer of forgetfulness covering the metal. Matthias picked up the dry cotton cloth. He folded it twice, forming a firm square, and rested it on the compass. With slow, circular movements, he began to rub the lid's surface. The friction of the cloth against the dirty metal produced a rough sound, a faint scratching that filled the space between the crackles of the logs in the stove. The loose dust began to yield. The white fabric soon gained gray smudges. Matthias turned the compass in his hand, feeling the rough texture of the dirt beneath his fingers, and continued to rub the rounded edges.
The dry cleaning was just the beginning, but it already changed the feel of the piece. The metal seemed less dusty, though it was still dark and stained. Matthias set the cloth aside and picked up the small glass vial. He unscrewed the metal cap. A soft scent of mineral oil and resin rose into the air, mingling with the aroma of burning wood. It was a clean scent of workshop and careful tending. He moistened a clean tip of the cotton cloth with a few drops of the oil. The translucent stain spread across the fabric. With the damp cloth, he touched the compass again. This time the movement was different. The oil reduced the friction, and the cloth slid smoothly over the lid. Matthias applied a constant pressure with his thumb. He rubbed the center of the lid, moving his finger in small, repetitive circles. The sound was now a damp whisper. Gradually, the oil's chemistry began to dissolve the old oxidation. The dark, earthen-colored grime began to break apart, revealing patches of an aged yellow underneath. Matthias had no hurry. The rhythm of his hands found a calm tempo, rubbing, turning the piece, rubbing again. He felt the weight of the brass warming in his palm from the heat of the friction. Outside, the wind blew a little stronger, making the snowflakes gently tap against the window glass, a sound like fine sand falling on paper. Matthias heard the sound, but kept his eyes on the small metal piece. He folded the cloth to use a clean part, applied another drop of oil, and focused on the compass's sides. There were small grooves all around the rim, made for fingers not to slip when holding the instrument. The dirt was encrusted there. Matthias used his nail behind the cloth, pressing the damp cotton into each sunken line. He went all the way around the compass, following the perfect curve of the circle. The oil dissolved the dark grime, which became trapped in the cloth. The transformation was slow but continuous. Where before there was only opacity, now a matte sheen emerged. The brass began to show its true color, a warm, golden hue that seemed to absorb the yellow light of the lamp.
Matthias cleaned the compass base with the same care. The scent of the cleaning oil was more present now, an aroma that brought a sense of order. He used a dry part of the cloth to remove excess oil from the surface. The metal, now free of thick dirt, was smooth to the touch. Matthias ran his thumb over the clean lid. The roughness had disappeared. The compass was still closed, but it no longer seemed like a forgotten object. It seemed like something waiting to be used. The surface was clean, but the compass remained closed. The small side latch that held the lid in place and the hinge on the opposite side were stuck. Matthias held the compass with his left hand and with his right thumb tried again to push the latch pin. He applied force, but the metal wouldn't move. Time had soldered the small brass parts together. Forcing it further could break the mechanism. He needed delicacy. He picked up the oil vial again. With the thin-tipped wooden rod, he collected a single drop of the liquid. With a steady hand, he brought the rod's tip to the compass hinge. The drop of oil touched the tiny metal junction and almost immediately was absorbed by the invisible crevices. He repeated the process on the latch, letting a minuscule drop trickle down the pin's base, a patient offering. Now it was time to wait. The oil needed time to penetrate, soften the hardened grime, and lubricate the path. Matthias leaned back in the chair. He looked at the window. The snow continued to fall, a white, silent curtain descending endlessly from the dark sky. The room's indoor light reflected on the flakes closest to the glass. The winter silence was profound. Inside the room, the iron stove gave a low crackle, the embers settling at the bottom. Heat radiated through the space, keeping the cold at bay outside. After a few minutes, Matthias leaned back over the table. He picked up the compass. The metal was warm from his previous contact with his hands. He placed his thumb on the side latch. Instead of pushing hard, he began to make small back-and-forth movements, gently rocking the pin. At first, it seemed nothing had changed, but on the fourth movement, he felt a slight give, a fraction of a millimeter. He continued. The oil was doing its work. The rocking motion became looser. Matthias pressed the latch down. There was a dry sound, a small snap of metal releasing. The latch yielded. The lid, however, didn't open on its own. The hinge was still stiff. Matthias held the compass base with one hand and with the fingertips of the other grasped the lid's edge. He pulled slowly. The metal creaked, a sharp, short sound. He didn't force it all the way. He opened it a little, then closed it, opened it a little more, and closed it again. With each opening and closing movement, the oil penetrated deeper into the hinge, and the friction lessened. The creaking was replaced by a smooth sliding sound. Matthias opened the lid completely. It stopped at a right angle, firm. The compass's interior was revealed in the lamp's light for the first time in many years. A scent of stored air, mixed with dry dust, rose from inside the piece. Matthias smiled faintly. The opening and closing mechanism was restored. He closed the lid. The click of the latch engaging was crisp and precise. He pressed the latch again, and the lid released with ease. The movement was now natural, effortless, like the breathing of an object that had just awakened. With the lid open, the compass's interior was revealed, but it was still unclear. The glass protecting the dial was fogged, covered by a milky haze of old moisture and fine dust that had managed to seep through the crevices over the years. Under the glass, the dial with the directions looked like a faded drawing, and the needle was still, motionless, waiting. Matthias noticed that a small, very thin brass ring held the glass in place. He picked up the wooden rod and with its tip searched for the small slit in the ring. He found it. With a careful movement, using the soft wood as a lever to not scratch the metal, he pushed the ring upwards. The rim yielded with a faint click and came loose. Matthias removed it with his fingertips and placed it on the table. Next, he turned the compass upside down onto his palm of his hand. The glass disc fell gently onto his skin. It was light and thin. Matthias placed the compass base on the table and picked up the glass by its edges. He used a clean piece of cotton cloth. He didn't use oil this time, just the dry cloth. He began to clean the glass, rubbing the center and rotating the piece. The milky haze was stubborn. He brought the glass close to his mouth and breathed a warm breath on the surface. The moisture of his breath fogged the glass for a second. Quickly, he wiped it again. The friction of the cotton on the glass produced a sharp, clean sound. The haze disappeared. The glass became transparent, reflecting the lamp's light like a small mirror of still water. He cleaned the other side with the same care, checking against the light for any remaining smudges. The glass was perfect. He rested it beside the brass rim. Now the dial was exposed. It was made of thick paper, almost like parchment, glued onto a metal backing. The backing was white, but time had left it with an antique ivory tone. The letters indicating the cardinal points were drawn with thick black ink. There was a layer of loose dust on the paper. Matthias couldn't use a cloth or liquids there, at risk of smudging the ink or tearing the backing.
He opened another drawer and took out a small brush with very soft bristles used for cleaning lenses. Holding the compass carefully, he began to sweep the dial. The sound of the soft bristles touching the dry paper was an almost inaudible whisper. He swept the dust from the center to the edges. With each pass of the brush, the black letters became sharper. The north, marked with a drawn spearhead, emerged with clarity. The south, east, and west also appeared strong against the ivory backing. Matthias blew lightly to clear away the last grains of dust that had accumulated on the inner rim. The dial was clean. The circular degree markings could be read effortlessly. Clarity had returned to the instrument's interior. The cold air outside seemed to contrast with the warm, illuminated precision of that small reading space. The compass was beginning to reveal its guiding capability, just waiting for its heart to beat again. The dial was clean, but the needle, the compass's vital center, remained lifeless. It was pointing in some random direction, resting lightly on the paper backing, trapped in its own inertia. The needle was a delicate piece, half painted dark and half left as polished metal, balanced on a tiny central pin, as fine as the tip of a sewing needle, a silent sentinel. Matthias brought his face closer to the table to see better. The yellow light illuminated the central axis. He noticed a minute accumulation of dark dirt right at the base of the pin, where the needle should spin freely. That small barrier was enough to prevent movement. Friction was the enemy of precision. He picked up the wooden rod again. With his fingertips, he further sharpened the wood's tip, breaking off a small piece to create a thin, sharp splinter. With extreme concentration, he brought the rod's tip to the center of the dial. He didn't touch the needle. He used the wooden tip to very delicately scrape the base of the metal pin. The movement was minute.
He felt the resistance of the hardened dirt yield under the wood's pressure. A tiny speck of dark dust came loose. He used the soft, bristled brush to sweep that speck away from the dial. Next, he needed to ensure the axis was perfectly smooth. He couldn't use oil there, as the liquid would attract dust and jam the needle again in the future. He needed dry lubrication. He picked up a graphite pencil on the table. With the same wooden rod, he scraped the pencil's tip, creating a fine gray powder on a piece of paper, a whisper of possibility. He touched the rod's tip to the graphite powder, picking up an almost invisible amount. With a steady hand, he brought the rod to the compass's central pin and deposited the graphite powder right at the contact point between the needle and the axis. The graphite slid down the thin crevice, a silent release. To test, Matthias lightly touched the needle's tip with the wood. The needle moved. The movement was still a bit stiff, but it didn't stop immediately. It swayed a little before stabilizing. He touched it again, pushing the needle to the side. This time, the sway was looser. The graphite was spreading along the axis, creating a sliding surface. Matthias held the compass in his hand and made a gentle movement with his wrist. The needle spun quickly. When he stopped his hand, the needle continued to sway, going back and forth in ever smaller oscillations. The ambient sound of the room seemed to have vanished, leaving only his attention focused on that small piece of metal swaying. The needle oscillated to the left, then to the right, in a natural rhythm until it finally stopped, a quiet triumph.
It was no longer resting on the backing. It was floating perfectly balanced on the pin. The dark tip pointed firmly in one direction. Matthias rotated the compass base, moving the dial, but the needle remained still in space, faithful to its magnetic north. The instrument's heart had begun to beat again. The invisible force of the earth now found a response in that small, friction-free axis. The compass was alive again. With the needle free and the dial clean, it was time to close the space and protect the work. Matthias looked at the separate pieces on the light wooden table, the compass base, the transparent glass, and the thin brass rim. The assembly process required the same care as disassembly to avoid trapping new dust inside, a delicate recreation. He picked up the glass disc by the edges, making sure not to leave fingerprints on the clean surface. With a precise movement, he lowered the glass disc over the dial. The glass settled into the small inner step of the brass rim with a very subtle contact sound, a faint click of glass against metal. The dial and needle were instantly protected, framed by perfect transparency, a clear shield. Next, he picked up the brass rim. He positioned the ring over the glass. With both thumbs, Matthias pressed the rim's edges down, applying equal force on opposite sides. The ring slid down, scraping lightly against the compass's inner wall. The pressure increased until the ring found its fitting groove. There was a dry, satisfying snap. The ring was in place, locking the glass firmly. The compass was whole again. But the work was not yet complete. The initial cleaning had removed the thick dirt, but the brass needed polishing to regain its true texture. Matthias put away the oil and picked up a different piece of fabric, a yellow, dry, and very soft flannel. He didn't use any additional products. The secret now was just the friction of the soft fabric against the clean metal, a gentle caress. He wrapped the compass in the flannel and began to rub it vigorously between his palms. The rapid movement generated heat.
He felt the piece's temperature rising through the flannel. The sound was a continuous, quick rustling, momentarily muffling the crackle of the wood stove. He polished the lid, the base, and the rounded sides. He opened the compass and polished the inside of the lid where the brass was smooth as a mirror, reflecting light. When he finally stopped and opened the flannel, the transformation was complete. The compass was no longer an opaque, lifeless object. The brass shone with a warm, rich, deep color. The lamp's light reflected in the metal's curves, creating clear bands of light that followed the object's round shape. The side grooves were clean and defined. The hinge no longer had dark oxidation marks. Matthias held the compass in the palm of his left hand, open and shining. The restoration work was finished, and now it was time to observe the tool in its fullness. He rose from the chair. The sound of the wooden legs lightly scraping the floor broke the room's constant quietude. He moved away from the work table, carrying the compass with him, keeping his hand flat and steady. A moment of contemplation. He took a few steps toward the center of the room, near the iron stove. Heat radiated strongly there, warming the air. Matthias looked at the dial. The dark needle was perfectly aligned. He slowly turned his body, rotating his shoulders to the right. The ivory paper dial rotated with him, but the needle floated over the pin, remaining absolutely still in space, ignoring the man's movement and pointing firmly in the same direction. He turned to the left, and the needle maintained its invisible anchor. The movement was fluid, without jerks, an immediate and silent response to the Earth's magnetic force. Matthias walked to the window. The air there was colder. He looked through the double-paned glass. The night remained dark, and the snow fell with the same serene constancy, covering the world outside with a thick blanket that softened all forms. The trees in the distance were just heavy white shadows. The dirt path leading to the house had disappeared under the snow. The landscape outside was vast, cold, and without visible paths. He looked at his hand again. The small compass contrasted with the vastness outside. In the midst of that white, disorienting immensity, the small brass circle offered a certainty. He aligned the letter N on the dial with the dark tip of the needle. Now the instrument not only pointed north, but organized all the space around it. He knew immediately that the dense forest lay to the east, and that the main road, invisible under the snow, ran to the south. The sensation of holding the functioning compass brought a simple mental clarity. There was no confusion, no stuck parts. The friction had been removed, the dust had been cleaned, and what was left was pure function. The needle rested calmly under the transparent glass, safe and free. The polished brass reflected the faint light from the table lamp and the orange glow of the stove's embers. Matthias ran his right thumb over the smooth edge of the brass case. The metal still held some of the warmth of the polishing. He felt the precision of the work in his hands. That object had spent years in the dark, paralyzed, but its nature had not been destroyed, only obscured. It took only care, time, and attention for it to return to exactly what it was created to be. He watched the needle sway one last time in a micro-oscillation and stop, firm and decisive, cutting the cold air of the room with its invisible direction. Matthias turned his back to the window and walked back to the work table. The sound of his footsteps was soft on the wooden floor. He approached the circle of yellow light projected by the lamp. With a calm movement, he closed the compass lid. The click of the brass latch sounded crisp in the silent room, a sound of closure. He placed the compass on the table. The polished metal gleamed softly against the light wood. He began to organize the space. He closed the small oil vial, feeling the texture of the cold glass. He folded the dirt-stained cotton cloth and the yellow polishing flannel, placing them in the drawer. He threw away the small graphite-smudged wooden splinter and put away the soft bristled brush. The sound of the drawer closing was a long, smooth slide. The table was left empty, except for the lamp and the restored compass, which now seemed to belong to that place, clean and ready, a quiet conclusion. Matthias stretched his arm and turned the lamp switch. The dry click extinguished the yellow light. The room was immediately enveloped in twilight. The only source of illumination now came from the iron stove, where the last flames had died out, leaving only a pile of red embers that pulsed with a gentle warmth. A faint orange light painted the wooden walls and cast long shadows on the floor, a soft glow.
He didn't return to the chair. He remained standing near the table, looking at the small brass object that reflected a subtle glow from the embers. The room's silence seemed to have changed. It was no longer the silence of something forgotten, but the silence of something at rest. Outside, the wind lost its strength. The snow continued to fall, slow and heavy, accumulating on the roof and branches, deepening the isolation of the winter night, a peaceful slumber. Matthias breathed deeply, feeling the warm air of the room and the clean, residual scent of polishing oil. His shoulders relaxed. His hands, which had worked with such precision, rested loosely at his sides. There was nothing left to fix, nothing to clean. The compass was ready, holding within itself the ability to find the way, waiting in silence until the day it was needed. Time within the house resumed its slow pace, matching the calm rhythm of the snow falling in the darkness. The heavy door rested upon the long workbench in the center of the workshop, occupying almost all available space. It was a piece of solid wood, ancient and worn by time, its surface covered by an opaque layer of accumulated dust and marks of neglect. Its edges were parched, showing small splinters that detached at the slightest touch, and the wood's original color had been lost beneath a lifeless gray tone. In one of the lower corners, the structure yielded slightly, revealing a gap where the pieces no longer fit firmly together. The iron hinges, still attached to the side, showed deep rust stains, rigid and immobile after years of oblivion. There was a silent imbalance in that piece, a sense of interrupted purpose that filled the workshop's illuminated space. Perhaps this is just one of those tranquil stories, made for quiet relaxation. And sometimes that's all we truly need. Matthias paused before the table, observing the door with a careful, lingering gaze. He ran his calloused hand over the rough surface, feeling the uneven texture and the cold of the forgotten wood. The touch revealed the resilience still dwelling within that structure, a dormant strength beneath the layer of neglect. In that moment, the carpenter decided to restore dignity to that piece. He would not let it crumble away. That very night, he would begin the work of removing the marks of time, of healing the wood's wounds, and restoring the function for which the door had been created. The commitment was sealed in the workshop's silence, a promise of transformation that would begin with his own hands. The workshop was a refuge of yellow light and warmth,
a space where the scent of sawdust and resin permeated the air. Outside the gridded glass windows, the winter night stretched cold and silent. Snowflakes fell in a slow, steady rhythm, covering the yard ground with a white blanket that softened the world's contours. The cold tried to press against the glass panes, but the warmth from the wood-burning stove in the corner of the workshop kept the space cozy and secure. The carpenter walked to the stove, opening the small iron door to add 2 more pieces of firewood. The flames immediately licked the dry bark, crackling with a lively sound that contrasted with the snow's silence outside. Warmth radiated through the space, heating the man's face and relaxing his shoulders. He closed the iron door with a metallic click and returned to the workbench. The light of the hanging lamp on the ceiling cast soft shadows over the old door's reliefs, highlighting every imperfection that needed care. Matthias took a deep breath, sensing the aroma of warmed air mixed with the scent of dry earth emanating from the door. He adjusted the thick fabric apron around his body, tying the straps at his back with habitual movements. The body's preparation accompanied the mind's preparation. He looked at the row of tools organized on the plank wall, each in its place, waiting to be used. The night would be long, cradled by the invisible fall of snow and the meticulous work awaiting him. The door, lying on the table, seemed ready to receive the first touch of restoration. The work began with the removal of the old hardware still clinging to the wood. Matthias chose a flat-tipped tool with a polished wooden handle, heavy enough to tackle screws seized by time. He leaned over the first hinge, positioning the metallic tip in the slot of a darkened screw. The rust had fused the metal to the wood, creating a stubborn resistance. The man braced his feet on the plank floor and applied constant pressure, turning the handle slowly. A dry creak echoed through the workshop, followed by the sound of small rust fragments breaking free.
The screw yielded millimeter by millimeter. With each turn, an orange powder fell onto the table, marking the effort of removal. Matthias repeated the process for each fastener, feeling the tension in his forearm muscles and the smooth texture of the tool handle in his palm. When the last screw was removed, he placed the small pieces into an enameled metal bowl. The metallic sound of the screws dropping into the container rang clear and precise. Then he pulled the entire hinge. It detached with a muffled snap, leaving behind a rectangular mark on the wood where the original color, a deep brown, still remained preserved, protected from light and air for decades. Outside, the snow continued to fall, thickening the white layer on the windowsill. The winter silence seemed to deepen, making the sounds inside the workshop even sharper. The carpenter picked up the large iron doorknob, which was also covered by a rough crust. The screws for this piece were larger and required a broader movement of his shoulders. He worked with patience, without forcing beyond the old metal's limit, until the doorknob detached into his hand. It was heavy, cold, and smelled of ancient iron and dampness. He gently placed it beside the bowl of screws, freeing the door of all its metallic appendages. With the surface clear, it was time to clean the accumulated dust. Matthias picked up a hard bristled brush and began to sweep the wood from end to end. His arm's movement was rhythmic, a constant back and forth that raised small clouds of grayish dust. With each pass of the brush, the superficial layer of grime disappeared, revealing the wide grains and marks of use the door had accumulated throughout its history. The scent of old dust filled the air for a few moments, soon drawn away by the current of heat rising from the wood-burning stove. Matthias paused to wipe his face with a clean cloth, feeling the tranquil breath in his chest. He ran his bare hand over the newly brushed wood. The roughness was still there, but the feeling of abandonment had vanished. The door was now a clean canvas, ready to be mended. He noticed how the lamp's light reflected differently on the now dust-free surface, showing the natural undulations of the tree's original cut. The cold outside seemed distant, contained beyond the window glass. The accumulated snow began to form small dunes in the yard, visible only when the gentle wind moved the flakes beneath the faint light escaping the workshop. Matthias walked around the table, inspecting every corner of the clean door. He looked for cracks, for parts where the wood had yielded to dampness or weight. His attentive gaze swept across the main plank's expanse, assessing what would need reinforcement before beauty could be restored. The cleaning had revealed the piece's truth, its weaknesses, and its resident strength. He took a lightly dampened cloth and wiped it over the dark mark where the doorknob used to be. The dampness made the wood's color leap to the eye for a brief instant, a rich, warm tone that promised to soon return. The air evaporated quickly in the warmed environment, leaving the surface matte once more. The carpenter folded the cloth and placed it in his apron's pocket. The first step was complete. The door breathed without the weight of grime and rusted metal. The around atmosphere seemed to approve of the progress, maintaining the soft crackle of firewood and the cozy quietude that embraced the meticulous work. The man's attention turned to the door's lower corner where the structure was compromised. A long crack separated the side plank from the central panel, creating a gap through which the workshop light passed freely. The original joints had shrunk with years of drying, losing the firmness that held the piece together. Matthias ran his index finger along the fissure, feeling the uneven edges and loose. He would need to fill that void and stabilize the wood before proceeding. He walked to a basket of wood scraps at the back of the workshop and chose a piece of light oak with straight grains and dense texture. Returning to the table, he measured the crack's width and depth using a small sliding metal instrument. With the numbers in mind, he clamped the piece of oak in a workbench vise. The iron mechanism tightened around the wood with a firm creak, holding it immobile. Matthias picked up a fine-toothed saw and began to cut. The sound of the saw cutting the new wood was sharp and musical, unlike the dry scrape of the brush before. The carpenter's arm movement was fluid, using his own body's weight to guide the blade. A fine shower of light sawdust fell to the floor, mixing with the shadows cast by the light. The fresh scent of freshly cut wood rose up through the air, a sweet and vibrant aroma that contrasted with the aged scent of the door on the table. The snow outside continued its silent dance, the flakes tapping lightly against the window glass like small touches of cotton. With the piece cut to approximate size, Matthias took a sharp-bladed tool with a short handle. He began to pare down the sides of the oak piece, creating a wedge shape, thinner at one end and wider at the other. Thin wood shaves curled as they left the blade, falling onto the workbench like small golden curls. He worked calmly, testing the wedge's fit in the door crack several times, adjusting the thickness with precise and delicate cuts. The sensation of the blade cutting the wood grain transferred a soft vibration to the man's hand, a tactile communication of resistance and form. When the wedge fit perfectly, filling the fissure without forcing the old sides, Matthias prepared the glue. He used a small, soft, bristled brush to spread a thick, yellowish liquid inside the crack, and over the new wedge's surfaces. The glue had a slightly acidic smell, which soon dissipated in the warm workshop air. He inserted the thin tip of the wedge into the gap and, with a solid wood hammer, began to tap on the wider end. The hammer blows were controlled and rhythmic. The hollow sound of wood striking wood echoed through the workshop walls. With each tap, the wedge descended a little further, spreading excess glue along the edges. Matthias felt the resistance increase as the piece settled into its definitive place, joining the separated parts with firm pressure. When the sound of the tap changed, becoming denser and duller, he knew the wedge had reached the bottom. The fissure was completely filled, and the door's structure regained its integrity. He took a damp cloth and carefully wiped away the glue that had seeped onto the surface. The contrast between the wedge's light wood and the door's dark, aged wood was evident, like a fresh scar on old skin. With a small, flexible saw, he cut off the part of the wedge that protruded from the surface, leveling the new wood with the old. The carpenter ran his hand over the repair. It was smooth, firm, and continuous. The door's corner, once fragile and loose, was now solid under his touch. The weakness had been healed with patience and precision, leaving the piece ready to once again bear the weight of its own movement. The warmth from the wood-burning stove continued to embrace the environment, drying the glue's dampness and bringing a sense of comfort to the completed work.
With the structure firm, the next step required patience and continuous effort. The door's surface still carried the remnants of an old varnish, now crackled and transformed into small dried scales that hid the wood's true color. Matthias picked up a rectangular cork block and wrapped it with a piece of rough sandpaper. He positioned his hands over the block, feeling the granular texture beneath his fingers, and pressed the tool against the door's upper edge. The first back and forth movement produced a rough, dragging sound. The immediate friction broke the thin layer of old varnish, transforming it into a fine whitish powder. Matthias established a steady rhythm. The scraping sound filled the workshop, a dry noise that rose and fell in intensity as the man's arms moved back and forth. The physical effort generated an internal warmth, making Matthias loosen his apron straps a little. Dust began to accumulate on the table and float in the lamp-lit air, creating small, visible beams of light. As each pass of the rough block, the door revealed a little more of its essence. The gray and opaque color gave way to a light brown tone, showing the natural patterns formed by the tree's growth. Matthias watched the curved lines of the grains appear like rivers on an ancient map. He wiped the surface with his hand from time to time, feeling the tactile transformation. What was once uneven and flaking became progressively smooth and uniform. The rustic touch of the raw wood was warm and inviting. The work of leveling the surface required attention to detail. In the areas around the central panels, where the wood formed small steps and moldings, the large block couldn't reach. Matthias folded a smaller piece of rough sandpaper and used only his fingertips to reach the corners. The movement became short and precise. The sound shifted to a soft hiss. He felt the wood's pressure against his fingertips, guiding the abrasion just enough to clean without altering the original shape of the reliefs. The scent of powdered varnish mingled with the deep aroma of exposed wood. It was a sweet and earthy smell, reminding of dense forests and dry leaves. Outside the workshop, the snow continued to fall, now more densely.
The yard's whiteness reflected the window light, creating a soft glow that tried to invade the space. The contrast between the extreme cold beyond the glass and the light sweat on the carpenter's forehead made the internal space even more protected and isolated. The world seemed to have stopped, reduced only to the size of that workbench and the constant sound of friction. After traversing the entire length of the door with the coarser sandpaper, Matthias changed the block's material. He chose a sheet with very fine grains, almost soft to the touch. The goal now was no longer to remove material, but to polish the wood, close the wood's pores, and prepare it to receive nourishment. The new movement over the door produced a velvety sound, a long, continuous whisper. The resistance lessened, and the block slid easily over the light brown. The wood responded to the polishing by acquiring a matte and natural sheen. Matthias ran the palm of his hand over the central panel. The texture was similar to a stone polished by a river water, cold for the first few seconds, but soon absorbing the skin's warmth. There were no more splinters, no more roughness. The repair scar in the lower corner had blended perfectly with the rest of the piece, visible only by the color difference, but imperceptible to the touch. The carpenter took a clean, dry cloth and vigorously shook it over the door, expelling the last layer of fine dust. The surface was clean, smooth, and exposed, breathing the warm workshop air, ready for the transformation that would follow.
The wood was raw, leveled, and thirsty. Matthias walked to a small shelf leaning against the brick wall and picked up a round metal can. As he opened the lid with a small snap, the rich, dense aroma of linseed oil and natural beeswax invaded the air. It was a nourishing, heavy, and comforting scent, which quickly overlaid the dry odor of dust and sawdust. He brought the can near the table and took a piece of soft cotton fabric, already yellowed from previous use. The carpenter dipped the tip of the fabric into the translucent paste inside the can. The wax had a soft texture, yielding easily to the pressure of his fingers. He positioned the cloth over the door's upper corner and began to apply the product with circular, broad movements. The effect was immediate. As soon as the mixture touched the smooth surface, the wood absorbed the moisture. The light brown color instantly transformed into a dark, deep, and vibrant tone. The wood grains, once subtle, leapt into view with strong contrasts of gold and dark brown. The sound of the cloth rubbing the wood was a soft, rhythmic murmur. Matthias felt the liquid's texture penetrating the door's pores, creating a protective layer that brought the piece back to life. With each circle traced by the man's arm, a new area of the door awakened. The contrast between the already treated part, rich and gleaming, and the still raw part, pale and opaque, was visual proof of the recovery. He advanced slowly, ensuring that every millimeter received the same amount of oil and wax. The work required no force, only constancy and care. The warmth of the environment helped soften the wax, making application easier. The reflection of the hanging lamp began to gleam on the newly treated surface, following the movement of Matthias's hands. The sweet scent of beeswax filled Matthias's lungs with each breath, bringing a sense of calm and completeness. The door drank the oil quickly,
like dry earth receiving the first rain after a long drought. He dedicated special attention to the reliefs and the panel moldings. With his fingertips wrapped in the damp cloth, he massaged the oil into the curves and the more difficult corners. The wood there seemed to absorb even more of the product, darkening intensely. The light oak patch in the lower corner also received its share. The oil highlighted the difference in the woods, transforming what was a fault into a mark of history and resilience. The piece gained character, displaying its marks with pride, protected by a warm sheen. Outside, the snow fell with a hypnotic slowness, visible through the glass fogged at the corners by the temperature difference. The winter night silence enveloped the workshop, isolating the man and his work in a bubble of suspended time. The only sound was the continuous glide of the cotton on the solid wood. Matthias finished applying the first layer across the entire length of the door. He stepped back and observed. The entire piece seemed to pulse under the yellow light, rich in colors and textures. He waited a few minutes, letting the wood absorb as much as possible. The warmth from the wood-burning stove aided the process, slowly drying the surface. Then he took a second cloth, clean and completely dry. With long, firm movements, he began to polish the door, removing the excess wax that hadn't been absorbed. The friction of the dry cloth against the wax generated a subtle warmth and raised a satin sheen, soft to the eye and incredibly smooth to the touch. The door no longer looked like an old piece rescued from abandonment. It had regained the grandeur and warmth of its youth, ready to face new winters with renewed resilience. The wood was ready, but the door still needed its joints and its voice. On the auxiliary workbench, the iron hinges and doorknob rested in the enameled bowl, covered by years of oxidation and grime. Matthias picked up the heavy doorknob. The metal was cold and rough, conveying the sense of abandonment that the door no longer possessed. He took a piece of fine steel wool and a small bottle of mineral oil. He let fall a few drops of the transparent liquid onto the dark iron and began to rub. The friction of the steel wool against the rusted metal produced a sharp, scratching sound, unlike all the sounds the wood had provided. It was a work of constant friction. The man applied pressure with his thumb, following the curves of the doorknob. The mineral oil mixed with the loose rust, forming a dark paste that stained his fingertips. Gradually, the rough crust yielded, revealing the original surface of the wrought iron. The metal didn't shine like silver. It displayed a matte graphite-colored sheen, dense and resilient. Matthias wiped the doorknob with a thick cloth, removing the dark paste. The piece was now smooth and clean, with a weight that felt more solid in his hands. He repeated the process with the large hinges. Every corner of the metal was rubbed until the dark, clean color of the iron emerged. The metallic, sharp scent of polished iron floated in the air, mingling with the sweet aroma of beeswax emanating from the door. The old pieces had regained their dignity, ready to return to their place of origin. The moment arrived to unite the metal with the wood. The carpenter positioned the first hinge over the rectangular marking on the door's side. The fit was perfect, an exact return to the space molded decades ago. He took the original screws, which had also been cleaned and lightly lubricated, and inserted them into the holes. With a thick-handled screwdriver, he began to turn. The sound of the metal entering the treated wood was firm, a dull, continuous click with each turn. The screw met resistance, but advanced securely, anchoring the iron in the solid structure. With each screw tightened, the door gained more weight and function. Matthias felt the final tension in the tool when the screw head aligned with the hinge surface, locking the piece in place. The connection was solid, without play. He moved the hinge with his hand. The metal turned smoothly, without the dry creaks of the past. The mineral oil had penetrated the joints, ensuring silent and fluid movement. The door was regaining its ability to open and close. He walked to the other side and positioned the doorknob. The dark iron base contrasted beautifully with the rich, dark wood. The larger screws required more force to be fastened. The man steadied his wrist and turned the wrench with determination. The sound of the final tightening echoed through the quiet workshop. He held the doorknob with his whole hand, testing its firmness. The piece didn't yield a millimeter. The sensation of the cold, smooth metal against the warm palm of his hand was the final touch of restoration. The winter silence outside remained unaltered, snow accumulating silently on the roof and tree branches. Inside the workshop, the tools rested on the table. Matthias ran a clean cloth over the newly installed hardware, removing any finger marks. The contrast between the vibrant brown of the waxed wood and the deep graphite of polished iron created a visual harmony of strength and care. The door was complete. All its parts, once separated by wear and time, now formed a single functional body, united by the silent effort of that night.
The door was ready, but lying on the table, it was still just an object at rest. To understand the result of his work, the carpenter needed to see it in its natural position. Matthias positioned himself at the table's edge. He held the side edges of the solid wood, feeling the firm thickness beneath his fingers. With a continuous movement and using the strength of his legs, he lifted the piece. The weight was considerable, gravity pulling the dense wood and solid iron downwards, but he kept it balanced. He took short steps backwards, sliding the door off the table, and rested it on the workshop's plank floor. The soft impact produced a deep sound that reverberated through the wooden floor. Matthias tilted the door slightly backwards, leaning it against the exposed brick wall, near the wood-burning stove. He slowly released his hands, ensuring the piece was stable. The change of perspective transformed the environment. The workbench, now empty, seemed immense, and the door, standing upright, assumed an imposing presence in the illuminated space. The man stepped back a few paces, crossed his arms, and observed. The yellow light of the hanging lamp bathed the wood from top to bottom. The dark grains of the oak meandered across the surface, gleaming softly thanks to the layer of wax. The dark iron hinges cast small, sharp shadows on the frame, and the doorknob rested firm, awaiting the touch of a hand. The scar in the lower corner, where the new wedge had been inserted, told the story of recovery without hiding the past. The door didn't look new, it looked eternal. It carried the weight of its age, but displayed the strength of something cared for and preserved. Matthias approached slowly. He extended his hand and grasped the doorknob. The touch of the clean metal was comforting. He made the opening motion, turning the iron piece. The internal mechanism, now free of rust, responded with a soft mechanical click, a sound of precision that had been rescued from silence. He pulled the door gently toward him, testing its balance.
Even leaning against the wall, the sensation of solidity was undeniable. It was a structure made to protect and welcome, to separate cold from warmth, noise from silence. The warmth from the wood-burning stove radiated through the environment, warming the carpenter's back as he contemplated the piece. The scent of wax, oil, and fresh wood still lingered in the air, a rich mixture that defined the workshop's essence. He imagined the place where that door would be installed. He imagined the sound it would make, closing against the door frame, isolating the cold wind of a winter night like this. He imagined the hands that would touch that same doorknob every day, finding the same firmness and security he felt now. He ran his open hand over the central panel, feeling the smooth, satiny texture glide beneath his skin. The roughness, the dust, and abandonment had completely vanished. The wood was warm, absorbing the environment's heat. The transformation was concrete and tactile. The physical effort of the last few hours had dissolved into the beauty of that result. There was no rush, nothing more to be cut, sanded, or tightened. The imbalance that existed at the beginning of the night had been corrected. Outside, the snowstorm began to lose its strength. The flakes fell more sparsely, floating slowly before touching the white ground. The layer of snow on the windowsill had grown, blocking some of the cold and enhancing the cozy, isolated feeling of the workshop. The silence of the outside world was deep and peaceful, a mirror of the quietude that now inhabited the interior of the workspace. Matthias remained standing before the door for a long time, just breathing the warm air and observing the wood's soft sheen. The work was finished, and the piece was ready to begin a new cycle of its existence. The night advanced into its deepest hours. Matthias averted his gaze from the door leaning against the wall and began to tidy the workshop. His movements were slow and automatic, the rhythm of one completing a ritual. He gathered the tools from the table, wiping the tip of each screwdriver and the blade of each saw with a dry cloth before storing them in their proper places on the plank panel. The metallic sound of the tools touching the nails on the wall was clear and precise. He took a soft, bristled broom and began to sweep the floor. The light oak sawdust mingled with the gray powder of the old varnish and the small flakes of rust. The broom scraped the wooden floor with a continuous, rhythmic sound, gathering the remnants of the work into a small pile in the center of the space. Matthias collected the dirt with a metal shovel and threw it into the disposal bucket. The floor became clean again, revealing the marks of use that the workshop itself carried. The wood-burning stove displayed only red, pulsing embers. Matthias added no more wood. The residual warmth would be enough to keep the space protected until morning. He walked to the switch near the entrance and turned off the main light that hung from the ceiling. The workshop plunged into a soft gloom. The only illumination came from the faint glow of the embers and the pale light reflecting from the snow outside, entering through the gridded window. In this half-light, the newly restored door took shades of bronze and shadow. The wax's sheen reflected the faint red of the stove. Matthias paused near the window, feeling the subtle cold radiating from the glass. He looked at the white-covered yard, untouched, peaceful. The physical fatigue in his shoulders was light and satisfying. He untied his apron, hanging it on a hook on the wall. The scent of treated wood was impregnated in the fabric and in the air. With a final look at the firm, silent structure leaning against the wall, He turned and left the workshop, closing his own door with care, leaving the work to rest in the quietude of the winter night.